everybody. Welcome to ABL Down on the Farm, episode 46, where we talk all things baseball prospecting, but particularly prospecting in the ABL, a 30-team Dynasty league with 20 minor league slots per team for a glorious 600 prospects. And tonight, I'm very excited to have Jeff rejoin the show, who's the owner of the St. Louis Cardinals in the ABL. Jeff and I are in many leagues together. He's been on the show many times before. So without further ado, I will bring Jeff onto the stage. Jeff, welcome back to the show, man. Good to see you.
Hi, everybody. Good to talk to you again. It's been too long.
Yeah, no, definitely. Excited for baseball to start this week. Opening day is just around the corner. You and I have been through many drafts now, both major league and minor league, and we're currently in the draft right now in one of our keeper leagues. So not Dynasty, not as many prospects in that league. Well, there are a few, but not like ABL or our 30-teamers. So I just published my Prospect Handbook, as you know, right? So I go through the whether it's worthwhile or not. I go through the effort of ranking all the prospects held in the ABL league, which this year is about 585 or 86 prospects. And so we've talked about this on the show before. It's been an iterative process, evolved over time. I'm now at a place where I think it's a more robust model. Maybe not where it's going to end up, but somewhere further along in its lifeline than it was when it started about 4 years ago. So as an initial matter, as somebody who's like seen the evolution of the prospect, I'm interested in your reaction to this year's edition. Generally, I know we're going to talk on the show about some specific prospects that you asked me to comment on and how they were ranked. But what are your reactions? What questions do you have about the handbook?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I wanted to say, how appreciative we are, as your league mates, that for all the time and effort you put into this Prospect Handbook. I know it's no small effort, and I could tell the kind of effort that you go through of evaluating the different weightings and figuring out how to kind of, your weighting page is especially interesting to me when I see how you rank kind of the scouts versus the frame versus the age to level. And I've seen that evolve over time. And I think you're starting to perfect it. I think it's what I really like about what you're doing here, Steve, is that it identifies prospects kind of like before the major lists do, and you kind of flag some guys that really have a tremendous amount of upside, really before they even start to produce and start to really get the attention of the masses. And so some of the players that you tend to flag at a high level here are players that I can kind of jump ahead of other people in other leagues on, which I appreciate.
Well, well, thank you for saying that. I mean, look, that is kind of the goal of the exercise, I think. As I put in the forward this year, the purpose of the handbook is really to start taking out the noise and try to look for objective factors that we can debate, like how much weight to give the various factors, right? The weights that I have assigned to them, are my own, and they have evolved a little bit over the years. But I put a lot of emphasis on scouting grades, which strips out a lot of the small sample size of stats that we see with prospects. But the entire goal is to try to identify prospects that have a chance to be above average major league players, right? So where's the upside and how much risk are you willing to assume, right? I'm willing to assume a fair amount of risk, but it'd be very easy to shift the weights if you're more risk averse and take the same approach and just increase the risk. And you would see the rankings change quite a bit. But what you do get is a list that is differentiated from industry standards. There's certainly a lot of guys who are like still highly ranked. No surprise that Connor Griffin was my number one ranked prospect. And probably no surprise about like the guys in the top 20 for the most part. It's just a question of where they fall relative to.
I can tell that the focus on who's going to be a difference maker really is kind of a differentiation. I think sometimes the fantasy lists are kind of the odds of making the majors at all, because not every prospect will. But someone that makes the majors as a utility infield guy is not useful for fantasy typically.
No, I agree. And so, like, how do you identify those players? And as you were saying, like, how do you get ahead of the curve, right? We have so much information noise right now in the industry, right? Like, everybody's publishing stuff. Everybody can tweet something or whatever we call it now, X something, whatever it's called, right?
Right.
I like tweet better. That it becomes very difficult, I think, for fantasy owners to kind of identify diamonds in the rough now, because there's no more rough. Right. We've gotten to a point where everybody's like, talking about these prospects. There's cameras on all the time. So one of the things I've focused on over the years, and as I've gotten kind of more advanced in my thinking about prospecting, is like really kind of honing in on these dudes early on. It does require taking on some risk and being willing to do that. But and sometimes I bite off more than I can chew.
Sure.
but so do we all, right?
Yeah. I mean, the hit rate on the DSL guys, is lower, but when they hit hard, So that's kind of the question. Plenty of them will fade, and we'll never hear from them again, in a year or two. But the others will be in the top 10 list going forwards.
Yeah, no, many of them will be there, and many of them will fade, as is the case. And some of them who aren't on the list, in my handbook right now, will explode over the summer,
Right.
and they'll be in next year's handbook. So that's kind of the fun of it. It's not a science; it's an art.
Right.
And we're all kind of, as fantasy owners, kind of we're arbitraging in a lot of ways, right? It's like we don't know, we don't see these players. We're only as good as the information we consume, right? But so I appreciate the comments on the effort. It does take a lot of work putting the handbook together. But did you have any? I know you're a big stats guy, right? So this year I started to integrate Nolan's stats into the handbook as part of my player-based grade. So for the people who maybe haven't read the handbook before, 60% of my evaluation of prospects is based on scouting grades from Baseball America and Baseball HQ principally, although I do use Major League Pipeline for J15s. But this year I started to integrate stats into that player-based grade. So it's not just their scouting grades. It also includes or accounts for their statistical performance in the past season. And so did you have any reactions to the stats I included or the percentages I assigned them, or what were your general thoughts about that?
I love that you focused on K minus walk percentage. To me, that's where McGonagall and guys like that just kind of like shine and end up like becoming like prospect darlings. You see early on in their prospect career, you're like, this guy doesn't strike out and he's walking all the time. He clearly owns a strike zone, and that's an indicator they're going to be able to handle more advanced pitching. I mean, if it were me, as I would weight even higher, on the statistical thing, and I would bump that up pretty considerably if it was my rankings as a whole. And there's sometimes when I look at players, and we'll probably talk about some, where I see like this guy has produced and you still kind of have him low, and I think it comes back to the original scouting grades and kind of like the star potential, like we were talking. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're including it. I do hope it continues to in the future, and maybe it continues to be a larger percentage, because it's a lot different hitting high school pitching than hitting double A pitching. It's a dramatic difference. I mean, Connor Griffith, of course, like Connor Griffin, when he was coming up, all we had was high school to go on, and I did great. I lowered him in drafts because of that. I'm like, okay, well, he was hitting homers against me. Cool,
Right. And that certainly doesn't count for either one of us.
Right. I mean, 25 years ago, but yeah.
Yeah. It certainly wouldn't count now. We're very clear that now it's irrelevant.
I do wonder, how did you factor in like DSL stats, because that's obviously completely different as well.
Yeah, so very little actually. So the way the scaling works is it's based on age. So again, like you've had the benefit of reading, and some of the audience may not have. So the scouting grades used to be 100% of the player base grade, And now it can be anywhere, the stats can be anywhere from 0, 10, up to 30% of the player base grade. And the scale 0 to 30 is based primarily on how old the prospect is. Like, so, these 16, 17-year-old kids, it's not going to count for a lot unless they reach a certain minimum at bats. And it still will only count. It's actually for hitters, it's plate appearances. For pitchers, it's innings pitched. But it's still probably only going to count 10%. So I discount it heavily for, it's included, but the scouting grade for the DSL guys is going to drive their value in the handbook.
Right.
As you get further along in their career, particularly for the college kids who are coming into the minor leagues right away, it's going to count more. And I think the challenge, I know that the challenge that I faced in picking the stats to look at was sample size, because, it is very difficult to compare minor leaguers across different levels based on sample sizes. There's a competition difference, which I think you were alluding to earlier.
Right.
But, guys playing in A-ball just don't get as many at-bats. Guys playing in the CPX just do not get as many plate appearances, right? There aren't as many innings pitched thrown. So you've got to have that baseline of, reliable sample sizes. And there are very few statistics that become normalized and reliable in the course of one minor league season. So I tried to pick stats, based on studies that have been done in various respected publications, Fangraphs, Baseball HQ, what have you, of reliability points that could become reliable.
Yeah.
And I think, the ones I chose ones that are readily available across different minor league levels at this point in time. So you've got strikeout rate, walk rate, and the ratio of strikeouts to walks. Those all become reliable pretty damn quick. And then a little bit after that is weighted on base percentage for hitters and xFIP for pitchers. You don't need a lot of trigger time for those to become reliable stats. And I think all of those are driving metrics that, indicate value for a prospect.
Mm-hmm.
The one that I would love to include for hitters that I cannot yet include because it's not readily available everywhere is exit velocity.
Yeah, I was just about to ask about that. Hard hit percentage, exit velocity.
Yeah, I would love to be able to include that. And I may be able to fold it in with Tom's assistance, Tom, who owns the White Sox in our league. And you and I are a couple leagues with him. He's, great stats guy. And he has like Google Sheets, even though I work at Google, he has Google Sheet skills that I don't have, right? So he can do things. He can make this all possible, but we may be able to roll in exit velocity for AAA players.
Yeah. Maybe double it. Anything below that.
Yeah, maybe and so once we get that in, that normalizes very quickly. Exit velocity, average exit velocity. You don't need a lot of batted ball events to get something of a reliable sample size. And that is a very good indicator of, power potential.
Right. For sure.
And so I would love to do that. So I'm not really interested very much at all, really, in the traditional back of the bubblegum, card stats. Because they take so damn long to normalize.
Yeah, and steals don't mean anything in minor leagues, basically.
No, and that touches on a good point, Jeff. How do you measure speed in these stats? Right, it is very difficult. So for the speed stats, it's almost all scouting grades. Because I just can't reliably put something in there at this point. I think the major league teams have data that we just don't have.
No doubt. Yeah, they're sitting there with the stopwatch at spring training, measuring everything.
Right. So when you see a scouting grade speed running, run grade, whatever they want to call it, they're accounting for those things.
Right.
And so I'm really leaning into that, as being the best kind of reliable metric I have for that. But yeah, I would love to make stats a bigger part of it. I think the challenge for all of us as fantasy owners is recognizing that sample size really does matter. We're going to talk about a couple players that you identified on the list that I have either ranked higher or lower than what might be consensus.
Yeah.
And why that is. And some of the answers, as we'll get to, have to do with sample size with the stats. And the stubbornness of like scouting grades and how they don't necessarily retreat based on one bad year and don't necessarily like jump exponentially based on one good year.
Sure.
Right. So definitely want to continue rolling the stats in. I also, I expanded injury risk this year.
How did you measure that? Just, I mean, I know you touched on it a little bit in your write-up, but it's a hard thing to gauge at times. Like freak injuries happen, hit by pitches and things like that. And
yeah, so what I'm really looking to target is chronic injuries, guys who just can't stay healthy, the Chase DeLauters and the Daniel Espinos of the world, right? Who have immense talent, but just cannot stay on the field.
I just drafted Ethan Conrad in first round of ABL, and he's hurt again. Going to miss like a month or two at the start of the year.
Yeah, I mean,
he was hurt, and I wonder if he's going to start getting that same label.
Yeah, and so like and part of this is just living and learning through making mistakes as a fantasy owner. So like like Dylan Lesko is a guy that had immense talent,
right?
Immense talent, but he was hurt coming into the draft year when we all drafted, in that class year. And I spent a first round pick on him in ABL. It was like mid first round pick. But he just never got right.
Right.
Never got right. I mean, immense talent, but like he's basically like, a bust. And I've started, and he's kind of the poster child, behind some of this, like, really accounting for chronic injury in the health score, and expanding it to really penalize players that just cannot stay on the field. So, over the years, like, guys like Daniel Espino were ranked higher on my list, and now they're like way, way, way down.
Sure.
Chase DeLauter has like slid down the list over time.
Yeah. And he's still exciting, if he ever gets a shot and stays.
Yeah, right. I mean, he again, Daniel Espino might play in majors this year.
Yeah.
Like he might finally get there. Ricky Tiedemann is another one who may finally get there, right? Immense talent. But health is a skill. And so it is very difficult to, calculate the nature of that risk. And, I basically assigned a 10-point scale for scoring, right? So for injuries, it's like 3 to -7, right? And so a guy like Daniel Espino is getting a -7.
Sure.
You're right. And that's, 7% of his grade, like overall. He also gets an additional minus for being chronically injured.
Right.
There's an additional drag in the handbook.
I think it makes sense. You have to factor that in because if the goal is to identify your chance of becoming a difference maker, then that's definitely a factor.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, it's these weights that I give them and the scoring that I give them is of course only as good as I am in terms of determining what the score is and what the weight should be. And you could change them easily. I mean, it's really the approach that I'm trying to develop as being like, a sensible way to think about prospecting.
Of course, the 16, 17-year-olds that you have ranked highly that we'll talk about, they haven't had the chance to show you if they're injury prone or not yet. They haven't had the chance to really develop statistical kind of factors that could weigh in. It's just all they really have is the scouting grade. And as the years go by, certainly that will fluctuate.
Yeah, 100%. So, and we will talk about 3 of them on tonight's show. The J15s are an interesting thing to me. I really punish them, more than people think in the handbook. The ones that end up getting ranked highly are the ones that get graded by Baseball America. So the ones that are only ranked by MLB Pipeline, I assign an extreme risk score to them. And ceiling risk is 13% of the grade. And that's basically the chance that this guy is ever going to reach the ceiling assigned to him by scouting. And it is 100% scouting for these kids, as you pointed out, because they have no stats. Right. The fresh J15s. When they get ranked by Baseball America, they get a little bit of a bump. because I weight Baseball America more heavily, and Baseball America assigns them a more moderate risk ceiling score. And so that tends to percolate them up in the list, but only if they also meet the other criteria, which is still driven primarily by this actual skill scouting grades. And we'll talk about some of them. But to me, they've always represented an enormous opportunity to buy upside that it gets ignored chronically by the fantasy industry. And, the question for owners is like, when do you pull the trigger on that buying opportunity in a draft, for example? Like, I thought, and we'll talk about the ABL first year player draft a little bit later in the show, but like, I thought one of the best values in the first round was Anibal Gomez at 20 overall. Like, to me, like, this kid has the potential to be a superstar. I drafted Colomé at 9.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he's right. Everywhere as well. Yeah.
Right. So, but if I had been like later in the draft, I probably could have gotten Colomé at 18 or 20. Right.
I think you might have been able to get him in the second round in some leagues.
Yeah, maybe. Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, but I was not gonna like pass on him because the way I have him graded. But I was kind of forced into that position. I would have rather had been in a position to draft him later and taken somebody else in addition. If I had a later first round pick, for example, in addition to my 9th pick,
right,
I would have passed on him and let him fall to me. Right. So much better to be able to draft Gomez at 20 in ABL, for my opinion. And maybe, as you were just saying, maybe get him in the second round, even both those guys. Right. So, the acquisition cost matters, I guess, is the short version of saying that.
Most people are drafting their FYPD off of, there's a few lists. They kind of are the industry standards that a lot of people use. And unless you really spend time like you do, Steve, digging into the Baseball America rankings and scout prospect grades, a lot of people are just probably kind of consolidating those lists or just using one of them and going off that.
Yeah. I think that's right. And that this is the way you can actually differentiate yourself and actually find value, right? Is by digging in and looking deeper under the hood on some of these guys. And which is why I've always played in the mud with the J15 guys. Like, nobody looks at them, right? And you see the same narrative every single year. Like, oh, they don't play good competition, even though they do. They're 16, they're or 17, they're a long way from the majors. They're like a year or two younger than the prep players that are coming up. Oh, I don't trust the system that's in place. Major League Baseball spends millions and millions of dollars scouting these kids.
Yeah.
Right. And so, is there an opportunity? Let me put it this way: the San Francisco Giants are going to give $5 million to Luis Hernandez, and have invested all that money.
They've already invested, probably that much.
Yeah, I'm buying that out. That I will buy. Who am I to second guess them? Honestly, at that point, they could be wrong. We all can be wrong, right? But it strikes me that that's a good investment. That kid. Yeah. So anyway, maybe we'll get into the specific questions that you raised about some of the guys that I had in the handbook. And the first one you flagged was Thomas White, who I have ranked incredibly high. I have him as the 3rd overall prospect in the handbook. And so what was you identified him as somebody that you thought maybe was ranked higher than you anticipated would be ranked.
I did. Well, when I saw you trade him for Sloan, and you traded him 3 times because he got backed out twice.
I was very anxious to get Thomas White.
Yes. I would have taken the Sloan side of that trade myself, just based on what I know, because I've watched him pitch quite a bit and I've read a lot about him, and I kind of, in my mind, and I love, of course, love that Sloan's in Seattle, and which has become a bit of a pitching factory, and it's a great ballpark for pitchers to pitch in as well. So from that standpoint, I preferred him of the two, and I saw that you have Sloan ranked in the 30s, I think, and you had White 2 or 3. And I was curious kind of what the big differentiator between those two was for you. You might be on mute, Steve.
You hear me now?
I hear you now. Yeah.
All right. I think my microphone just. I'll take that away. Just using the computer. So,
Okay.
I like Ryan Sloan a lot as a prospect, and I ranked him very highly in the handbook as well. He's a great prospect. Thomas White. Well, let's take a step back and talk about the handbook's methodology. To see a pitcher ranked this highly in the handbook is quite an extraordinary thing.
Yeah.
All right, because I punish pitchers in the handbook. I have a position score that is about, I think, 7% of their grade, and pitchers are the lowest scored position. They get a negative relative to the field. They tend to, in the scouting grades, to get higher risk assignments in terms of their ceiling risk, which is 13% of the grade. Okay. Obviously, pitchers in general have a lot more injuries. Thomas White and Ryan Sloan have not. All right, so that's kind of a push between the two of them. But there is about a 30-point difference, 30/10 of a point difference between the two pitchers in my rankings. I think it's actually 37. I think Ryan Sloan had a 9.61, and Tommy White has a 9.98, as is reflected on the screen. So why is that? It's mostly scouting grades.
Yeah.
All right. So I have Baseball America's grades up there on the screen. They gave him a 70 overall, which is freakish for a pitcher.
Sure.
All right. And you can see he has 3+ to double plus pitches.
Yeah.
Right. The big bugaboo for him is his control, all right, which is below average right now, and presents significant risk. And the handbook accounts for that, right? Baseball HQ is on the other side, the right-hand side. Again, really good scores. They're not the traditional 80-point scale that you see, but a 4 basically is like a 60. And a 9 is like basically like a 65, 60 rating overall, right? So really good scouting scores. That's a huge percentage of his grade, and the 70 by Baseball America is really driving that. But then when you think about the statistics I added this year to the handbook, right? His stats are down there, and the kid's incredible. He just he's got basically a 40% strikeout rate.
Right. Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah, and a 25 K minus walk ratio, which is a huge driver for me for any pitching prospect. I actually think it's the number one metric for any pitching prospect is the K minus walk ratio. And he's got a great xFIP as well. They both scouting sources gave him a modest risk grade, so not super high risk. And here's another kicker: age versus level.
Right.
5 years younger.
He jumped 3 levels last year, right?
Yeah, he's in AAA, right? Yeah. And he's 5 years younger than anybody else he's playing against. That is a huge vote of confidence by the Marlins in this kid. This guy, he also has a good frame, which I didn't include on this. He's 6'5", he's over 200 pounds. He's a big kid. He has the potential to be a true number one. Cy Young talent, dominant pitcher. He could, also end up flaming out because of his control like anybody else. But huge, huge upside. And when you see a prospect in my modeling system get this high up and be, to be a pitcher this high up, it's quite extraordinary. So I jumped at the opportunity, and I love Ryan Sloan. Sloan was a guy I acquired in a trade last season as part of my rebuilding efforts. I was going to build a staff around him.
Right.
But I love this kid. I love Thomas White. I love Ryan Sloan too. I think he's going to be a great pitcher. But the other factor in trading for him, just to finish the thought, was the fact that once I got him, I drafted Liam Doyle, another 21-year-old, right? Because they both can ascend while I have Yuri Perez on a 5-year contract, right? Yeah. So I can have all those guys in the rotation at the same time, whereas Ryan Sloan's a year behind.
You're heavily invested in Miami's pitching department staff to continue to develop these.
I am. I am. Hopefully the Marlins know what they're doing. You know, but that was basically the rationale behind the trade, but also an explanation of why he's so highly graded in the handbook. You know, I mean,
I get it. It's jarring to see him ahead of like DeVries and Weatherholt and McGonigal and guys like that. I do think he's exciting, of course, but yeah, I mean, I guess maybe the fact of having a pitcher that high at all is what really kind of.
Yeah. Well, on that point, the other thing I would say is to factor in the Z scoring that we do in the handbook. And so, you know, part of the assessment and the grade that gets assigned to them is relative to the pool they're being compared to. And what that results in for pitchers is the truly elite pitchers get pushed up because there is a bigger gap in the pitching talent than there is in the hitting talent. And so there is just a mathematical relationship that you'll see some of the top end pitchers get ranked a little bit higher than you might expect. And what I'm communicating is that like these guys are like so special relative to their peers that they're worth gambling on. They could be true difference makers. When you think about constructing a roster and you have like, you know, X number of slots you have to fill, a certain percentage of those are pitching slots, right? And so Tommy White represents a chance to get like an exceptional difference maker at that vital spot, that scarce resource that you have on your roster. Whereas a Leo DeVries or a Jesus Mate or some of these other guys, they're great prospects too, right? But they're slightly more fungible than a Thomas White is. And that's what the Z scoring is taking into account.
I feel like the flame out rate for high end prospect pitchers is higher than the flame out rate for hitters. I mean, maybe that's in my mind, but maybe it's just more than anything.
No, I think that there's some truth to that. I mean, it's all, you know, anecdotal, right? I mean, like, you know, and there probably have been studies on this too that I don't have at my fingertips. It is generally the rule that drafting hitters is safer
than
drafting pitchers, right? And so, you know, would you trade Thomas White straight up for Jesus Mate or Leo DeVries? Maybe you wouldn't.
I would certainly do that especially for DeVries for me.
Right. So you would do, if I had DeVries, you would say you know, here, take Tommy White from me, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. So I understand that. And so the other thing I would say about the handbook is like the grades that I assign them are not like they're not intended to be like etched in stone.
Yeah.
Like, right. So if I have a guy like a 9.98 and another guy's a 9.97, they're basically like fungible to me at that level. Right. It's like there's a margin of error. And if you prefer to have, you know, Leo DeVries over Thomas White, that makes perfect sense. That's great.
Have you ever done an analysis of like grades year to year? Like here's the biggest risers and followers from the previous year?
I haven't done it yet, but I think, you know, it's funny. Somebody raised this topic in the chat room for ABL. And I'll give the same answer that I gave there, which is I think the handbook is now for me at a level of maturation where I can start doing that.
Right.
Like, I don't think the grades from like 2 years ago are that relevant to the grades now. Yeah. But I think going forward, like we're probably there. I can tell you that some of the guys we're going to talk about tonight are like they've fallen in the grading, and some others have risen. I mean, Thomas White has always been very high for me. Yeah. But we'll talk about Noah Schultz in a minute, and he's fallen a little bit. But yeah, I think going forward, I'll be able to do that. And maybe I'll even include like, you know, that in part of the publication. Because I think it is interesting. And it makes you accountable too, as somebody who's doing this, right? So it's worthwhile pursuing. But let's move on to the next player that you raised, or the next three players, which the J15 babies, right? And as we were, you know, so this is, you know, Jonathan Colomé, Angel Gomez, and Wanda Asijan, all of whom I have ranked very highly. I have their scores there. Colomé and Gomez are kind of in a different tier for me than Asijan, but still have them ranked highly. And you know, as we were talking about earlier, the J15s are almost exclusively driven by their scouting grades. And you can see all three of these dudes were graded by Baseball America, right?
Right.
I include the pipeline scores. The pipeline scores tend to be a little bit more generous in their scouting grades than Baseball America. Not always, but as a general rule, that's true. So I discount them through heightened ceiling risk scoring, and also by weighting Baseball America higher in the overall formula. So here, when Column A and Gomez had their Baseball America's grades published right before the draft, you can see their grades there. I mean, they gave Column A 65 grade, all right, which kind of explains why I took him at 9.
Right.
Right. So 60 power, 65 overall, 55 hit tool. And I also just included his frame there down at the bottom of the screen at 16 years old, 6'2",
Right.
190. Like, it's hard to actually process that for me. A 16-year-old being 6'2", 190. This kid is a stud athlete.
He's a big kid for sure.
Yeah. So like a lot of upside. Again, somebody could say, "Oh, there's too much risk for me. I would draft him later, not as high as 9." Totally fair.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure you would already know what my argument is, like, before I even say it. Just like you have those first two ahead of someone like Josh Baez, who to me is already acting like a star, already hitting advanced pitching, already shown that he can have like power and speed, and
yeah. By the way, I have ranked highly too, but like not
he's like the potential of these guys already realized, yet you still have them ahead of him.
And and if you look at one thing that happens with scouting grades, I mean, this is a great point, Jeff, that you're making. So like, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, that's all. Go ahead.
All right. So one thing that happens with these scouting grades is they track how the player is actually doing in the real world. So Baez is a guy whose scouting grades really took a hit because he struggled.
Yeah, he did.
And, they went down and down and down and down. And, I don't remember where I had him ranked last year, but I don't think he was on the top 100 list. And this year he's back on it. And he got a big bump in Baseball America on his scouting grades because he finally put it together. And you and I were kibitzing about him a couple days ago in the DM, and I would really love to see him, particularly as a Cardinals fan, do it again. And I'm very hopeful that he will. These kids on the screen, they have to prove it. They have to live up to the scouting grades, and we'll see how they do. I mean, it could be that these grades come down and they fall down. There is risk in these kids. What I'm identifying in the handbook is that based on these scouting grades from sources that I trust and that do this for a living, right? These kids have huge potential, right? And it's just a question of how much you want to assign the risk score to reach their ceiling, right? I have it at like 12% on the ceiling risk. You could assign it 20, 30%, whatever you want, right? And that would push these kids down. It would elevate a Josh Baez above them. It would, right?
So what do you put the risk of someone like Baez, who's
let me look that up. Let me see what Baez. I don't, so just to be clear, I don't assign any risk myself. I just assign the weight.
Okay. Yeah.
Baseball America and Baseball HQ are basically driving this train. And so I'm looking up Baez as we're talking in the handbook. So Baseball America gave him a high ceiling risk grade, which is not abnormal, but it's not the average you might want to see for a kid this age.
Right.
And Baseball HQ gave him a D, which is basically the equivalent of a high grade for Baseball America. So what they're indicating there, I think, is that like they want to see him do it again too.
Yeah.
Right. And which is fair. Right. Now, they've also given these guys, Column A and Gomez, high risk grades too. Sejan even more so. You see Sejan, he's got a 5 hit tool grade from Baseball America, so he got pushed down. But he's still an exciting prospect, above average grade overall, and obviously the pipeline grades are like really generous. And he's an exciting prospect. But Baez would be ranked higher if not for that kind of ceiling grade drag, if you will, on him. And I think that's what you're seeing. And if I increase the ceiling risk, Baez would drop even further, right? So
maybe it's my fan of like the Cinderella story or something, but someone like Baez struggling and then getting a little bigger and a little and figuring it out, like hitting the right coaching or hitting the right approach or something, and just like flipping a switch and turning into an absolute stud is almost more impressive to me than someone that would always come easy for,
Yeah. No, I mean, look, it's a great story. And you and I, as Cardinal fans, we're both invested in him doing well. I would love to see this become a star. It'd be great. But if you strip out that kind of narrative and just kind of try to be objective about it, that's kind of what I'm, signaling with him. He's still like incredibly highly ranked. I mean, he's like, on the top 100 list, he's like ranked as going to be above average. And that's really all you can ask for. I don't think he's actually that far different from Essegian where I have him ranked. But the upside on Colomé and Gomez is like so high. Yep. So that answers the questions about those three dudes, who I also covered extensively in the prior podcast earlier this year. Noah Schultz is a guy who was very interesting. You flagged for me. I'm a big Noah Schultz fan, always have been. And I was able to buy him relatively low in ABL this last year because his 2025 sucked.
It did.
Right.
It did.
Yeah.
Walking everybody, right?
Yeah. So he had a 73 inning sample size between AA and AAA. And it dropped his stock a lot on these industry lists. And, I looked at him as a buying opportunity because of these scouting grades you're seeing on the screen, particularly from Baseball America. Right. So even after the 2025 season, they gave him a 65 grade overall. Right. Now, Baseball HQ dinged him. They brought him down from a 9 overall to an 8, which is still like that's like basically the equivalent of a 55 grade, an 8.
Does Baseball America weigh in like reliever risk? I mean, is that a thing with them? Just because, I mean, if you're walking in the high teens, you're not going to be a starting pitcher in baseball.
Yeah, no, the control definitely let me put it this way. They will acknowledge reliever risk, and then what the handbook does is penalize you for it.
Okay.
So I account for it. I will find it basically is a negative 2-point drag on your in the formula. It's an added risk that I put in. So it does get factored into your ceiling risk. Is the short answer. I think Baseball America is probably a little bit more nuanced than that. There are a couple guys that come in the draft every single year that are huge reliever risks, and I always end up bumping them even further down than Baseball America because of this issue.
Right.
But the other thing I would highlight about Noah Schultz is, again, the sample size. If you look at his pitching stats in 2024, they're off the charts good. Right? I mean, you got a 30% strikeout rate, over 25% walk to, strikeout rate, and his xFIP is really good that year too. And the sample size was 73 innings in 2025. So can you over-index on that one, sample size of what would amount to 11 or 12 starts in the majors? You can. Is the 2024 guy the real guy? I'll tell you this, his 2024 stats are much more in line with his prior stats in the minors than last year. Is there risk? There absolutely is risk. And, Schultz is a guy I had ranked in the top 10 last year. And now he's dropped down to a 9.53. Right. So he's fallen in my rankings. He's fallen in Baseball HQ, but in Baseball America, he's still very well regarded. Right. He's also 4 years younger than the competition.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Right. And age versus level is something that I really focus on because it's an indication that the White Sox, whatever we think of them as an organization, these guys who get paid to do this for a living are promoting him. Right? He
was a high school pitcher.
Yeah.
He was. Yeah.
So here we are. We'll see. year. Yeah, he does have time. This is like he has to show that he can command the strike zone this year at this level. But he has time and he's very talented. Jet Williams is a guy that you flagged as maybe I had ranked too low.
Yes.
So
And you do. I think he's like a no doubt MLB starter soon. I think there's opportunities in Milwaukee, and I think he'll be a good regular player for sure. And I thought you dinged him on I don't know if it was on frame or on some of the other things, probably a little bit more than I would have.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it because I think he's going to be a good player too. An 8.61 grade overall is above average regular for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So we're not actually saying different things. Okay. I think he's going to be a starter. I think he's going to be probably an occasional all-star. He's going to be a valuable fantasy asset. But this was really driven by his scouting grades and a little bit by his frame, but not a lot. He is 5'7". Okay. Which generates power risk, right? And in fantasy, power really matters because home runs, particularly in a points league like ABL, generate the most points, right? And they have all kinds of cascading effects on other stats, runs scored and RBIs and all those other things, right? So that matters a lot to me. If you look at his Baseball America grade, you get a 45 power grade. 55 overall, which is above average, which is the handbook is trying to target, right?
He hits the ball hard, though. He does.
He does. And, the question is, hitting the ball hard at 5'7", the problem is that those are doubles, right? And he can still be a valuable player, right? Yeah. And so, if you look at the HQ grades as well, again, they're perfectly fine. They're perfectly fine. Those are basically a 55 grade player grade. And he's got speed. And so if you're in a roto league where his speed will actually be even more valuable, right? Because stolen bases are a category, he might be elevated even higher, right? But here in a points league like ABL, I'm not over-indexing on the speed. It gets weight, but I'd rather have the power, and he doesn't have it. So to me, he's a guy who he's on the top 100, with an 8.61. I like him, but I have no shares of Jet Williams because people, to me, they overdraft him and over-index on what his value is. But I think he's going to be a good player. We'll see him in the major leagues probably very soon, and he'll probably have a very successful, nice career.
I think his value goes up in Milwaukee too, personally.
I do too. I agree. It's a good park to hit in. He'll get playing time. They'll be more patient with him in Milwaukee than they are in New York. It's probably a great landing spot for him. So definitely an exciting player. The last guy I wanted to cover was J.R. Ritchie, who you flagged.
I did.
Yeah. And so what were your thoughts on flagging him, and why did you raise him in the first instance?
I think you had Owen Murphy pretty low too. They're both Braves pitchers, and the Braves promote their pitchers fast, and they've had a lot of success in recent years. And Ritchie himself has had a ton of success when he's been pitching. And to me, I think he's a fringe top 100 guy, and has a pretty good chance of being in the Atlanta rotation for years to come. And I thought your ranking didn't really reflect that. I was just kind of curious.
Sure. So, with a 7.72, again, this is a guy, what that means, it translates to is above average, right? He has a good shot to be above average, player. Not as good as Jet Williams that we just talked about.
Yeah.
Right. But, I think the ceiling is just lower.
Yeah.
Right. And so in a 30-teamer like ABL, he has value.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Am I drafting him in a shallower league? I'm not excited about him. Right. And so look at his grades, right? 55 grade overall from Baseball America. That's a good grade. That means he's going to be above average regular. Baseball HQ gave him a 7, which is basically a 50 grade, average regular player. Okay.
Sure.
Average risk, they think he's going to hit his ceiling, right? They think he's going to deliver on that. I'm always a little bit hesitant to go with a guy who has a 50 grade fastball, right?
Yeah.
The major league level, very difficult for a starter to have success. Not possible, just to be clear. It's just more difficult to have a success at the major league level if you don't have a fastball that can establish a strike zone early on in the count.
It's more of a sinker baller that gets soft contact, I think.
Yeah. So he could have a successful career. This is not like in any way, shape, or form a statement about his major league baseball career. It's really about his fantasy value. Right. And, he's probably not a guy that's going to generate a ton of strikeouts. He could be a good 4 in a rotation, maybe a 5, in there. And he's going to get innings. Right. And that has value. The one thing I would flag, going to the point about strikeouts, if you look at his performance, his strike to walkout ratio is very anemic.
Yeah.
It was 15.75% last year. And he's never been dominant in that area. And there's a real risk there that he could get bumped out of the rotation if he can't improve that, because he can be replaced by somebody else coming up in the system pretty quickly.
I think originally what drew me to him is he's got 6 good pitches, and just kind of like he's been able to use that effectively. Certainly, like
I agree with that. Yeah, he's got he's going to get to the majors barring injury, right?
Yeah.
And he's going to have a career. I just don't know that the ceiling is very interesting on him, right? And to me, there's a little bit of long reliever risk there. And these major league teams, they can bring up guys in their rotation. They've got a ton of talent behind them. The Braves, for example, Didier Fuentes is making the roster this year. I mean, there's just an endless supply. They also have guys coming up, deep that are right now deeper in their system that I like a lot too, right? So, I like
the Braves had all those injuries, and they didn't sign, any of the free agents. They didn't go after Giolito or Littell, and they're clearly banking on these kids to come up and make a difference.
Yeah, and I think they will. I think they will. I mean, it's not a bad. They've done a very nice job of drafting pitchers, particularly young pitchers, and bringing them along. There's a guy in the draft this year, Briggs McKenzie, who I like a lot. And I have a few shares of him. He's 19 years old. He was not overhyped in the first year player draft kind of industry coverage. I can tell you that Baseball HQ gave him a 9 overall, which is basically like a 60 grade. So he shot up my draft boards because of that. Baseball America gave him 55 grade, I think. I'm just going off memory here. I don't have it in front of me, but yet another interesting kid the Braves drafted. Right. They're a very good organization. I forgot there was one other guy that you mentioned that we should talk about was Johnny Formello.
That's Johnny's my guy. He has been for a couple of years, and he's had injury issues, of course. But I mean, he's got power and speed in spades.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about Johnny, right? He definitely got dinged because of injuries in the handbook, right? Going back to what we talked about earlier in the show. But if you look at the Baseball America grade, they don't like his power, right? Baseball HQ gave him a 3, which is basically a 50 grade. It's a little bit of a tweener. A 3 for them is like a 50 to 55. But this Baseball America grade really hurt him in the handbook, the 45, 70 speed. Again, in a roto league that carries more weight than it does in the points league. But also if you look at his strikeout rate last year, 29%, it's high. It kind of dovetails with the hit grade that you're seeing on the screen there too, 45. He's still young for his level. He's 2 years younger than the level he's at. Not as stark as some of the other players we looked at earlier, but still younger than the competition he's playing against. But he's going to have to really show that he can hit and make enough contact to get a regular playing job at the major league level. He probably will get a shot, but there's a guy on your team I like a lot better than him, which is Ty P.
Yeah, I like Ty P. They're similar players for sure.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, I mean they both have. I think Formello's power is a little understated there from what I've seen, and when I've watched him play, I think he's got a pretty easy power swing, and I mean he destroys baseballs. But,
yeah, well, look, I mean, like these, if he can demonstrate that power as he
has to help him. Yeah.
You'll see the scouting grades accommodate for that. But this is another reason why it'd be really wonderful to have exit velocity data across the different levels.
Right.
Like one of the guys I was talking with Tom about, Luis Hernandez, the Giants J15. He's 5'10".
Yeah.
And I would really love to have reliable exit velocity data on him.
Sure. Yeah.
See where the power is. Like, another guy I'm really high on that the Cardinals drafted through the J15 process or signed is Manuel Luna.
Right. Big boy. Yeah.
He's a big kid and he's already belting the ball at 110 miles an hour.
Right.
And so when you read, stats like that, if I could have that on a reliable basis, that'd be great. For a guy like Formello, like I would love to see that. Like how hard is he hitting the ball? What consistency? And is the power grade that he's getting kind of understated, as you're suggesting? Your eyes can like tell you one thing in limited sample sizes, but is it being demonstrated over time?
Yeah.
That's what I want.
That'd be interesting here to see. Did you want to dig into the FYPD for a little bit here?
Let's do that. Yeah, we can do like an ABL versus Baseball America, because the Baseball America did a mock fantasy draft. And well, first of all, let me just get your general impressions about the first player draft in ABL, and what surprises there were to you.
I would say your pick was the most surprising to me. You've explained it here in great detail.
The Dan Doyle pick?
Yeah, your first round pick there. Your very first one.
Yeah, no, I mean, I did explain it. I was, I happen to like Doyle a lot.
Yeah, right. I like seeing Willits go first as he did. I mean, it's kind of like I haven't seen that in any other draft. Originally, kind of like he went first in the real MLB draft, right? So I mean, you think you see that more often, but it doesn't always work out that way. You took Doyle first. That's right. Doyle was your first pick.
Yeah, I took Doyle number 2 overall.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it would. Was there a lot of variance you saw to the
let's
chalk?
talk about it. So like so the Baseball America first year player draft. I'm just trying to. They locked me out of my account for a second. I got to sign in.
I was just pulling it up again too.
Yeah.
So we had Willits, Doyle, Anderson, Kilby, Hernandez, both Hernandez.
Yep.
Parker, Arnold. I mean, pitching can get pushed up sometimes in these points leagues. So it's a little riskier when you hit a pitcher. When you have a pitcher hit, it's extremely valuable because you can hold them for years.
Yep. So the first year player draft for Baseball America, they included the Asian players that came over and signed free agents. So those are obviously excluded in ABL. So they had their first, player eligible in our draft was Kate Anderson, who got drafted a little bit further down. He got drafted 3, but not like that much difference, right? So that's like in line. Their second player off the board who was eligible was Liam Doyle.
Yeah.
So that's in line with what I did. Then a guy who they drafted a lot higher was JoJo Parker.
Right.
Who went 7 overall, but number 3 overall. So not that big of a difference. The next guy on the board was like Seth Hernandez, which is kind of in line with where he went in our draft. Right.
I love JoJo Parker, by the way.
I love him too. He's great.
I got him in LORJ, and I was pretty excited about that. So.
Yeah, super exciting player. The next guy on their list was Dax Kilby. He basically went 4 overall in our draft.
Yeah.
Right. So, a little bit lower on Dax Kilby than, Evan, who was a Yankees fan, drafted him. A guy there, Baseball America is higher on that I really like and went a little bit lower in our draft. And I talked about him on the last podcast was Xavier Nyans. Yeah. The Astros, who, Dylan really likes and, snagged him. So I like that pick. They picked Arquette after Nyans, right? And Arquette went a little bit further down. He went 17 overall in our draft.
Yeah.
So slight variance there. The biggest variance was Willits went next with number 1 overall. That's a big difference. The next guy on the list after Willits, Jonasi Colomé, who I picked 9th.
Right.
So that's basically in line with where I picked him when you take out the Asian players.
Yeah. Sounds like you're right in line with them. That makes sense.
a guy who went. And by the way, Colomé went ahead of Luis Hernandez in Baseball America. Justin Steele went next for Baseball America. Where did Steele go? Steele Hall. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Steele Hall went 19th overall in our draft, so they're a little bit higher on Steele Hall. Luis Hernandez went 14th, or not 14th. I guess when you back out the Asian free agents, we're talking about 11th overall.
He went 5th in our league.
Yeah. Josh Hammond went next in Baseball America. So where did Hammond go in ours?
He went 23rd to Duke.
Yeah. So they're a little bit higher. So Duke, again, poaching a guy that Baseball America likes. Jamie Arnold went next in Baseball America.
He got pushed up because of pitching.
Yep. Pushed up. Next up was Gavin Fiend of the Rangers, who fell a little bit in our draft. Fiend went. He still went 12th overall.
12th, yeah.
12th. So that's actually about the same. It's roughly the same.
Rourke's a prospect, not two, and I can't count the amount of times that I've found a pop up guy and realized Rourke's been on him for 2 months ahead of me. So.
Right. No, he definitely like reads up and poaches them early. Yeah. Ethan Conrad, a guy you mentioned earlier on the show, went next for Baseball America.
He's
a little bit lower than he got picked in ABL, which is you got him 10th, right? But not a huge delta. So that's basically 15th they took him. Right. Kyson Witherspoon went next.
How far did Holiday slip in that list?
Yeah, I still haven't mentioned his name, right? He's coming up. Ethan Frey went next, 17th overall. If you take out the Asian free agents, he went 22nd in our draft.
Right.
Angel Gomez went next, so that would be 18th in Baseball America. So he went 20th in our league. But again, kind of another explanation for why I have Gomez and Colomé ranked so high. As you can see, like it's dovetailing with what Baseball America thinks, which is no surprise since so much of my like grading system is based on these scouting grades. But then finally, Ethan Holiday gets taken at 19th overall. And Holiday's he got taken 11th overall in our draft. He's a guy like we talked about on the show last week. During the first year player draft, who like had been rumored to be the top overall pick at one point and fell so hard. And I think what's so interesting, just to reiterate some of the points that I covered last episode, that 45 hit grade and the 45 speed, it's like all power for this kid.
And he had a bad debut, right?
So. He did. And the contact rate is a little scary. Right. Very similar to Charlie, Condon in Colorado, right? Very scary, contact rate grades. Ike Irish got picked next by Baseball America, which is like really interesting. It actually dovetails with where Gary took him with the New York Yankees. And I do think you start to see like a little bit of follow the leader here going on. Like I think people like look at the Baseball America list, you start seeing some people getting picked up in this range.
Where did they have Andrew Fisher on their list? Because he was the other one I was considering at 10, honestly.
Fisher went. I'm doing the math here. He went 26 overall.
Okay.
Yeah, I like Fisher too.
He's looked great this spring, and when he's gotten a look too.
Yeah. So after Irish, they picked Lafayette of Cleveland.
Yeah.
And then Kepley of the Cubs, and then Bremner, of the Angels, who was the number 2 overall pick in Major League Baseball, and an ACL was actually the number 1 pick by Linney.
Yeah.
And he fell down here. Where did Bremner go here?
18 to Gary.
Yeah. So again, another college pitcher, interesting arm. Gage Wood of the Phillies. This is the guy who has tremendous reliever risk.
Yeah.
Went 24th overall in Baseball America. And I think he went 26th overall in our league to the Nationals. So not really a surprise. And then a guy I love for the Padres is Schoolcraft.
Yeah.
He's 6'8", like really fun prospect. He went 27 overall to John and the Tigers. John had a really nice first round draft. He got Hernandez as Schoolcraft. He got two really interesting both young pitchers. Andrew Fisher, I mentioned before, went 26 overall. Then
Right.
Aiden West, Fabrico Blanco, Kaysen Cunningham, and then Quentin Young rounds out the top 30 Baseball America. Yeah, which again like dovetails like pretty closely with ABL. And I do wonder like how many
Baseball America acolytes in ABL as yourself that definitely push some of these guys up.
Yeah, I know for sure. I think and as I said before, I think you start to get a little bit of the follow the leader kind of thing. If people have the list in front of them, they're drafting off that.
Right.
And at one point in the ABL draft, I can't remember which round it was. It was pretty late, I think. Baseball America pushed out a story about like breakout prospects that there's in the backyard, and Duke immediately drafted one of them. It's like I know Duke started the article because he drafted the guy. I think it was in the 5th round. I can't remember who the player was, but I was like, oh, Duke read this story. Great.
Yeah, that's always funny when it happens for sure.
Yeah. So listen, I really appreciate you jumping on the show, for reading the handbook, asking the thoughtful questions again, as you always do. It's an ongoing process. We'll see what next year's edition brings. And now with like all the AI stuff, I can do all kinds of fancy artwork for it too. So that's
true. I love the baseball card you did. That was awesome.
Yeah. Well, as I said in the chat, like I will have the first ever ABL trading card very soon. I expect it to come next week in the mail, and it'll be available for shipping to anybody who wants it. They can have the superfractor of Connor Griffin.
Yeah.
All right, but we'll hopefully have you later on in the season on the show, Jeff. Always value you coming on and talking baseball with me. But until then, reminder it avails to ABP.
That's right.
Prospecting.
Thanks, Steve.